We are looking at an essay on Explain the Importance of Lady Macbeth, which scored 26 out of 30 in my marking. 27 is a grade 9, so this is the top of a grade 8, and I'm going to show you why and how to move it up to grade 9. The essay is from my newsletter, which you can grab in the link in the description. The extract is the first appearance of Lady Macbeth, which is lucky because it means you can follow Lady Macbeth chronologically through the play. Here's the thesis statement. Shakespeare cleverly presents Lady Macbeth as powerful, guilt-ridden, and ambitious. So we have a 3-part thesis sentence here. These are the 3 things that Daniel is going to try to prove in his essay, as she demands spirits to summon up male traits. However, this power is undermined by her desperation for power and the male characters in the play. So this second sentence gives us 2 of the author's purposes. One, that she can never properly achieve power because she is too desperate for it. And the second is that she lives in a patriarchal society and men are going to prevent her from achieving power. Firstly, Shakespeare constructs her to represent the majority of women in the Jacobean era. So this is a clear statement of what Shakespeare's up to. The examiner's therefore thinking, oh, this could be a conceptualized response, which is in level 6. And notice that he slipped in some context linked to some interpretation, which is going to be that for all her failings, she is typical of women at the time, and maybe these failings would be more widespread because of the way patriarchal society behaves. So this is a really complicated idea, and if he can pull it off in the essay, I know he's going to get really high marks. Patriarchal society, by the way, is one of these phrases that you know you're going to be able to use no matter what the question, and you should get used to doing it now in your revision. Lady Macbeth is presented as powerful in the play when she demands the spirits to unsex her. Shakespeare's effective use of the imperative verb unsex emphasizes her power and strength. She is demanding evil spirits to take her femininity away, despite knowing that she will go to hell. Okay, now we've got quite a bit of analysis for AO2, looking at the meaning of the words that she's using and the implications of them. Notice that Daniel uses really short quotations which he can embed into his sentences. This is super efficient. It means that you can say a lot more by writing less. It's relevant that unsex is an imperative verb because she's giving instructions, so this terminology is actually appropriate. And Shakespeare's method is that he's emphasizing her power and strength. So methods are anything that the writer is actually doing. By getting into your quotations early, you send a signal to the examiner that you're really on top of this essay. Let's see how he does this in the second paragraph. This is exemplified further as she asks for her breast milk to be replaced with gall. Milk has direct connotations to motherhood and life, completely juxtaposed with gall, a vile substance connoting bitterness and death, reinforcing how powerful and brave Lady Macbeth was during the Jacobean era. But it would also horrify them because she uses her power for evil in persuading Macbeth to regicide. So we can see, again, we've got these brilliant embedded quotations, and we've got quite a detailed analysis of how they inform us about Lady Macbeth's character. More than that, though, he's telling us how the Jacobean audience would react to that, and that links to Shakespeare's purpose. We are supposed to be horrified by her power, which also suggests that patriarchal society was right in suppressing women's power, doesn't it? Because Shakespeare could be hinting that all women are much more capable of evil than men. Of course, you can take the opposite view. It's after all Macbeth who commits the murder, and so he is more evil than Lady Macbeth. She refuses to do it in the end because Duncan looked like her dad. Now Daniel's next paragraph looks at Shakespeare's purpose in a bit more detail. Shakespeare's use of the soliloquy here builds an intimate relationship between the contemporary audience and Lady Macbeth, as she would be alone on stage. So she would be reflecting her true feelings and desire to become a wicked male like Macbeth, which would not occur in many plays at the time. So it's not a very well developed point that Lady Macbeth is an unusual character for the early 1600s, but it's relevant. It's even more relevant in this sentence. This would be deeply upsetting for the deeply Christian audience of 1606, as they would be fearful of the supernatural and of being damned. So he could go on to say that this portrays Lady Macbeth as a villain, or it portrays patriarchal society as villainous, because the only way for a woman to gain power is to become wicked like a male. The males are the role models here. Macbeth is a killer, isn't he? That's how the play starts, with him slaughtering the enemy. So this is one way that Daniel could have got into grade 9, playing with this idea of whether Shakespeare wants to portray Lady Macbeth just as a villain, or whether he wants us to sympathise with her because she can't get power any other way in this patriarchal society. Now, I'm not asking you to believe one way or the other, it's up to you, but considering that discussion would have got him into the grade 9, and he doesn't do it here. Now Daniel's going to give us a paragraph which he knows is going to be relevant to any essay, no matter what the topic, because this quotation will be relevant to any question, because it's Christian imagery, and the Christian context of the play is always going to be relevant. Furthermore, Shakespeare shows the importance of Lady Macbeth as she represents the theme of appearance and reality. Shakespeare states that Macbeth should look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it if he wants to kill Duncan. Shakespeare's clever use of the juxtaposition and religious imagery between innocent and serpent emphasises Lady Macbeth's duplicitous nature as she takes on the role of a Machiavellian villainess disrupting the great chain of being. So Daniel's come straight down on the idea that Lady Macbeth is a complete villain and we shouldn't have any sympathy for her whatsoever. This takes us into the grade 9. Unfortunately, his connective is furthermore, as in, I'm just telling you another thing that I know about Lady Macbeth, rather than linking it much more specifically to the argument he started earlier on. He could easily have linked it back to the idea that she's risking her soul in order to satisfy her ambition, which makes her a villain, because a Christian would never risk their soul in this way. But he didn't. There is some awesome AO2 stuff though, where he starts analysing individual words and talking about the context. Writing about this as religious imagery gives us the right terminology and the author's perspective. And he's introduced some knowledge of the time. Machiavelli was a writer whom the nobles at court would have known, and he was scheming and villainous. So the comparison to Lady Macbeth really works. And of course, everyone would have known the context of the great chain of being. And breaking that links to her role as a villainess. Now you can see how describing either Macbeth or Lady Macbeth as Machiavellian will be relevant to every essay, as will discussing the great chain of being, because the whole point of the play is that shouldn't be disrupted through regicide, and that will be relevant to every single question. So have a banker paragraph like this, adapt to this one for your own uses, it's going to fit every essay. In the next paragraph, Daniel's going to give us loads more context, but the context is going to score marks because it is linked to the author's purpose and to our interpretation of the character of Lady Macbeth. This is illustrated further as she uses every psychological trick she can think of to make sure Macbeth carries out their plan to murder Duncan. Now, it would be even better if he'd shown us which tricks that she actually uses, and preferably brought in some quotations to do it. Angering the Jacobean audience, as serpent has biblical connotations in Genesis. The serpent tempts Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, which leads to the downfall of mankind, foreshadowing Macbeth's own fate later in the play. Additionally, it relates to Guy Fawkes' gunpowder plot, where King James I awarded a medal to honour the discovery of the gunpowder plot, which showed a serpent hiding beneath a flower. Therefore, by comparing Lady Macbeth to a massacre and a violent act, Shakespeare ultimately presents her as villainous, and perhaps as the cause of Macbeth's hamartia. Hamartia is a quality of Greek tragedy. It's something the hero has. What is it? It is their fatal flaw, the one flaw in their character. In Macbeth's case, many people think it's ambition, but here Daniel is arguing it's not necessarily his ambition, it is his wife's ambition and his love for his wife, so he goes along with her villainous plans. I particularly like this idea. But he could have argued it either way to get the marks. So you can see this is all being clearly thoughtful for level 5, but it's lacking analysis of quotations. So there aren't enough references for AO1, and as we move to the next paragraph, I'm mentally checking how many quotations there are so that I can decide whether or not to move it up to the grade 9. Moreover, Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as important because she fights a mental deterioration and feels guilt for her sins. This is shown when she experiences repeated sleepwalking and pronounces, "Out, damned spot! Out, I say!" Shakespeare effectively contrasts between a spot, connoting something merely small, to her reaction, livid, frightened, and apprehensive. The powerful adjective damned links again to hell, and the noun spot perhaps can be interpreted to the idea that she has been marked by the devil. Right, so the number of quotations is improving considerably. It's a good analysis. You don't need to point out that spot is a noun because it's not important, and neither is it important that damned is an adjective. That's not useful terminology because it doesn't help us understand anything. Remember, the imperative verb did help us because imperative means it's giving an instruction, it shows how she's taking control. So that paragraph had enough quotations to help us view the number in the whole essay as developed, so that's level 5. Structurally, Shakespeare's use of disjointed exclamations increase the tempo of the play, echoing her pounding heart, and relates to the idea of disdaining fortune, revealing her obsessive desire to remove imaginary stains of blood from her hands. This cleverly creates apprehension from the modern and contemporary audience for her, because they would be viewing Lady Macbeth's actions and words to convey how her conscience is rebelling against the unnatural fiend that ambition has turned her into. Okay, well this paragraph tells us that Shakespeare is punishing Lady Macbeth for being unnatural, for becoming a fiend, but it's not yet linked to why Shakespeare does this. Is he supporting the patriarchal view of women as more easily influenced by evil, or is he attacking society's view of women that they are inherently more evil? Remember that reference to the serpent? Eve is seen in Christian theology at the time as more evil than men because Eve is the one who tempted Adam. Eve is the one that the serpent was able to persuade first because she was mentally weaker than Adam. That is the religious implication at the time. So you can see how Christianity is linked to patriarchal views of women. And having a flavour of that discussion would easily have gotten Daniel into grade 9. During James I's rule, society had the patriarchal belief that women had a very low status and were no more than property of their husbands, as they were considered to be inferior. But had he linked this idea to original sin, we could have had a good reason why they were considered inferior. Consequently, Shakespeare's audience would be viewing performances of Lady Macbeth being played by a man. Shakespeare uses this convention, perhaps in order to emphasise the character's masculine qualities. So that is a really interesting idea. When she asks to be unsexed, she is, remember, being played by a male actor. So now it would be really interesting to say Shakespeare's exploring not what women are like, but what men are actually like, the male capacity for violence and evil. But he doesn't do that. You can, though. We might interpret this to imply that Shakespeare opposed this idea by portraying Lady Macbeth as ambitious and feisty and lacking femininity. Consequently, he may not simply punish her with her suicide, he may also be illustrating how male oppression of women leads to them having to deny their own natures. So this is brilliant, that is a wonderful discussion of what Shakespeare's up to, and you should steal it. Okay, now I have enough convincing use of context to give this level 6 for AO3 because it is linked to Shakespeare's purpose. In conclusion, Shakespeare successfully presents the development of Lady Macbeth as a salient feature of the play, as it highlights the overwhelming power of the patriarchy, as well as her guilt and vaulting ambition. So that's a pretty short conclusion, but he's writing under exam conditions. I do like the fact that it includes a quotation, something I always ask my students to do. So every examiner has an unconscious idea of how many quotations they expect in a full answer. It is not written down anywhere. There isn't any instruction from the exam board. Now for me, it's about 15 quotations to get full marks, and this answer looks like it only has about 11. So for me, the AO1 references component is incomplete. It's stuck in level 5. AO1 also asks for a complete task. Now I've got another prejudice here. I think it's very difficult for a student to write a convincing argument in fewer than 900 words. Now Daniel's essay is much shorter than that, so it feels too short. Let's go back to the thesis statement. The essay was going to prove that Lady Macbeth is powerful, guilt-ridden and ambitious as she demands spirits to summon up male trait. Yet, that bit has been well done, but her ambition has not been properly explored. A longer essay could have looked at one of the causes of her ambition, particularly the violence of it, which is that she has obviously just lost a child and she and Macbeth are grief-stricken. Another one, of course, will be the oppression of the patriarchal society. How male characters have undermined her has also not been properly explored. So there's a wonderful discussion to be had about why Macbeth sleeps separately from her during the sleepwalking scene, why he refuses to tell her about his plan to kill Banquo, and why he doesn't tell her about his plan to kill the Macduffs. This breakdown in communication in the marriage would have fitted perfectly in the essay and played into this narrative about how male characters exploit women. Once she's helped him commit regicide, she's no longer as attractive to him. That would easily have made this fully convincing. If you want a grade 9 analysis of every scene, check out my guide. Or if you want a free video showing you how to get grade 9 with Lady Macbeth, that's the one coming up now.